Coming up today, tourists are targeted in a terror attack in Istanbul. At least 10 people are dead, many of them Germans. The Turkish government says Islamic State did it. The chief nuclear envoys of South Korea, the US and Japan meet today. They will coordinate their response to North Korea's recent nuclear test. They want China to use its sway to pressure Pyongyang. First, more US sanctions against North Korea loom. US Congress is set to vote on a bill aimed at starving the regime of funds for its nuclear program. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello and welcome. It's 6 a.m. on Wednesday, January 13th here in Seoul. I'm Mark Broom and you're tuned in to our early morning edition of Arirang News. We start in Istanbul, where at least 10 people have been killed by a suicide bomber. Turkey's president says the suspected attacker was a Syrian national from the Islamic State group. Now, ISIS has yet to claim responsibility for the attack. The blast ripped through a crowd of mostly German tourists in Sultan Ahmet Square, an area popular with tourists. It's believed 9 of those killed were from Germany. 15 other people from various countries were injured, some seriously. Condemning the attack as a murderous act, German Chancellor Angela Merkel expressed her sympathies for the victims and their families. Speaking at a press conference, she vowed that Germany would continue fighting terror. In the wake of the seemingly targeted attack, the German government has warned its nationals to avoid crowds and tourist sites in Istanbul. South Korea's top nuclear envoy is set to meet his counterparts from the United States and Japan today to discuss countermeasures to North Korea's latest nuclear test. Coordination with Washington and Tokyo is important, but China's response is crucial, given its influence over its longtime ally, North Korea. Connie Kim reports.
South Korea's top nuclear envoy, Hwang Jung-guk, will be holding a series of talks with representatives to the six-party denuclearization talks involving the U.S., Japan, China and Russia this week. Through the talks, Seoul is hoping to formulate an effective response to Pyongyang's fourth nuclear test last week.
The government is putting in all efforts to bring about a strong and effective UN Security Council resolution through the meetings with the US, Japan, China and Russia. We're also working to form a united international response against Pyongyang's provocation.
First up on the list is a meeting with the U.S. and Japanese top nuclear envoys Sung Kim and Kimihiro Ishikane in Seoul on Wednesday. Discussion will likely focus on a strong and comprehensive UN Security Council resolution. The three are expected to call on China, North Korea's closest ally, to play an active role, as it now seems to be taking a more lax stance compared to immediately after Pyongyang's test. The South Korean nuclear envoy will then meet with his Chinese counterpart Woo Da-wei in Beijing on Thursday to get China's assessment of North Korea's claimed hydrogen bomb test and discuss the degree of sanctions that'll be agreed upon at the UN. Wrapping up the series of talks will be a bilateral meeting between Hwang and the Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister Igor Morgulov next Tuesday in Moscow. But discussions on possible responses to Pyongyang's nuclear provocation will not end there. Vice ministerial-level officials from South Korea, the U.S. and Japan are set to meet in Tokyo on Saturday to deliberate on results of talks between their respective nuclear envoys. However, there are concerns close cooperation between the three countries will make it hard for Beijing to take a strong stance against North Korea, as it will not want to lose risking its strategic asset. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Now, the US House of Representatives is set to vote on legislation that seeks to punish North Korea for its latest nuclear test by expanding sanctions on the regime. Lawmakers are scheduled to vote Tuesday local time on the North Korea Sanctions Enforcement Act, which proposes to deny Pyongyang the hard currency it needs for its weapons programs. Chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Ed Royce, who is the main sponsor of the legislation, says the new sanctions would put targeted financial pressure on Kim Jong-un and his officials from the assets they maintain in foreign banks. The legislation was introduced by Royce and dozens of other House members in February last year in response to the North's hacking attack on Sony Pictures in 2014. It passed through the Foreign Affairs Committee later that month, but has since been dormant. International skepticism is growing over North Korea's proclaimed ability to perform a certain kind of ballistic missile test. North Korea monitoring website 38 North reported Tuesday that Pyongyang's submarine-launched ballistic missile test last month was likely conducted from a submerged barge rather than a submarine, as the regime claims. Citing U.S. rocket expert John Schilling, the report says the North's video shows what appears to be a support vessel some 50 to 100 meters from the launch site. The report says it would be far too dangerous for a vessel to be so close to a submarine, but it would be just the right distance for a submerged barge. It added that satellite imagery of the launching site 2 days after the test showed a submersible test barge sitting next to a crane. The expert says North Korea has a long way to go to develop an SLBM system and that initial operational capability is not expected before 2020. Now, a new state-of-the-art missile defense plan will be added to an upcoming round of drills between South Korea and the United States this spring to better counter North Korea's missile capabilities. For more on this so-called 4D plan, Kim Hyun-bin reports.
South Korea and the United States have a new plan for countering North Korean missiles. It's called 4D, and a version of it will not be part of an annual round of bilateral military exercises called Key Resolve and Full Eagle, which use computer-based simulations and field exercises. 4D stands for Detect, Disrupt, Destroy, and Defend. As part of the 4D plan, the drills will feature state-of-the-art weaponry and surveillance equipment, including U.S. military satellites and high-altitude surveillance drones. Experts say the surveillance equipment can detect enemy missiles in less than a minute and destroy the missiles in midair within 5 minutes after launch. The 4D plan was adopted during an annual bilateral security meeting in November, where South Korean Defense Minister Han Min-gu and U.S. Defense Secretary Ashton Carter endorsed the concept as a way to better counter nuclear-tipped warheads and biochemical weapons from the North. However, some experts say the 4D plan, though ideal, is unrealistic.
The Korean military currently can't fully execute the 4D plan, as it requires missile defense and attack methods. To make it possible, an enormous budget is needed, so realistically the plan is impossible.
The 4D plan will be incorporated into the simulation portion of the joint military exercises, which will now be held in early March, after the date was moved up following North Korea's fourth nuclear test last week. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Now holding the last of her New Year's meetings, President Park Geun-hye met with the nation's brightest science minds on Tuesday. She told them about her administration's plans to up support for research and development. Kim Min-ji has the details.
This year marks the 50th anniversary since the founding of the Korea Institute of Science and Technology, or KIST, Seoul's first research institute. Over the span of 5 decades, South Korea has become one of the world's leading IT powerhouses. The International Telecommunication Union ranked it first in its Global ICT Development Index for 2015, with ICT exports accounting for nearly 1/3 of Korea's outbound shipments. In a New Year's meeting with hundreds of leading scientists, President Park Geun-hye stressed that a creative economy based on science, technology, and ICT is the only growth engine for the future, fully vowing support for innovative technologies to enter the market. But the president noted that Korea is now stuck in a nutcracker situation where domestic ICT products are having a tough time competing with the low Japanese yen and the fast-developing Chinese products that are catching up with Korean technologies. In order for tech companies to not lose their competitive edge, President Park vowed to remove excessive regulations that stand in the way of research. She also pledged to make use of the country's innovation centers, the 17-branch network set up to nurture startups, and bridge the gap between job seekers and employers. Conglomerates in charge of each center will do the job of matching prospective youth with smaller companies. President Park also reiterated a pledge to build a so-called science village for retired scientists so that they can fully devote themselves to education and research without having to worry about their life after leaving the labs. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Now, in political news, Korea's rival parties are still locked in a standoff over a series of controversial bills 2 days into an extraordinary session at the National Assembly. Leaders of the newly renamed main opposition Minju Party are also fighting to keep more lawmakers from defecting to a new Liberal Party ahead of general elections set for mid-April. Ji Myung-gil has the details.
As the legislative impasse continues at the National Assembly, the ruling Saenuri Party vowed to try to get things moving by working more closely with the government on key plans.
The delay in the passage of labor reform and economy-related bill is a heavy burden on the Korean economy. Our party will work with the government to manage state affairs and look after people's livelihoods in the face of the continuing uncertainties in the Korean economy.
The ruling party urged the main opposition Minju Party of Korea to refrain from blocking important bills, adding that despite accusations to the contrary from the opposition, it had made enough concessions during negotiations. The Minju Party seemed more focused on its recruitment efforts as lawmakers and party members continued to defect to the new party launched by former opposition co-chair An Cheol-soo, and left in December over a leadership struggle with current party chair Moon Jae-in.
It is sad that lawmakers are leaving our party, but we have renewed hope as we are boldly recruiting new figures and nearly 100,000 people have joined us by registering online. I will work with my remaining colleagues to build new hope for the party.
12 lawmakers and dozens of other party members have left the Minju Party since An's departure. And on Tuesday, another Minju Party lawmaker, Chae Won-sik, quit, bringing the total number of assembly seats held by the party down to 115. The mass exodus has left the party on the verge of splitting even further down factional lines, with fewer than 100 days remaining before a general election on April 13th. Ji Myung-gil, Arirang News.
Now, how low is it going to go? It's the question experts would like to be able to answer as oil prices continue on their slide. US crude has tumbled through another psychological level, this time under $30 a barrel for the first time in 12 years. Dipping during Tuesday's session, the price of West Texas Intermediate went sub-30 for the first time since December 2003, before recovering slightly to end the day at $30.41. Oil prices have now been on their worst 7-day run since the 2008 global financial crisis. Analysts say the drop is being exacerbated by lower global demand and a supply glut. And after days of volatility, China seems to have found some degree of solid ground, with its main market rebounding slightly by the close of trading on Tuesday. That is a major improvement from the nosedives it took in the first week of the year. But for Korea and other Asian countries, trading remains rather choppy and uncertain. Our Ji-won has more on the markets.
Asian stock markets continue to suffer even with China's rebound on Tuesday. Korea's benchmark Kospi index continued its fall, dropping just over 0.2%, closing below the psychologically significant 900 mark. Japan's Nikkei also felt a shock coming back from holiday, falling about 2.71% for a 3-month low. In China, shares finally bounced back, with the Shanghai Composite Index closing up 0.2%. The Shenzhen also edged up nearly 0.4%.
The slight recovery in China is not big enough to say that the market there is stabilizing, so other Asian shares won't feel a positive impact. Also, there are domestic concerns dragging the Korean market due to the poor performance of big local companies, like Samsung Electronics and SK hynix.
Korea's tech giant Samsung Electronics shed over 0.5%, while chip maker SK hynix lost almost 3% at Tuesday's close. The local currency also lost ground, ending at 1,210 won against the US dollar, dropping to a 5.5-year below. Analysts say unless Chinese stocks continue to climb steadily, Asian stocks won't be out of the hole anytime soon. Lee Ji-won, Arirang News.
Well, that's all the news we have for now. I'm Mark Broom. Thank you as always for watching. We will be back at 10:25 a.m. Korea time for President Park Geun-hye's special address. That will be on North Korea and other issues of a domestic nature. Until then, goodbye.